What I would like to talk about at the moment is my Western Historical Association membership and the conference I attended in October 2024. Again, participating in professional associations marks the scholar as interested in networking with others, other historians, in learning new fields of research, learning new theses or thesi or thesis, new interpretations, different. Also to explore areas that maybe he has not studied before, or maybe there's new areas to explore. And so being a member of professional associations is extremely important. I was a member this last year of the Western Historical Association. And in October of 2024, I attended the Western Historical Association conference in Kansas City, Missouri. It was a concurrent conference with the Southern Historical Associations conference, and there were crossover panel discussions of that as well, Western and Southern. One of my areas of interest is the American West, specifically religious history out west, and so my own religious faith history, and so the Western Historical Association was a significant one for me to pick because it dovetailed with many of my areas of interest. I grew up in the American West, Southwest Arizona. I'm very interested in Western history. My family history is a lot out west, settled in the American West. Um, Again, I'm interested in American religious history. My religious faith history is prominent out west. So, Western American history is um, kind of a natural, for me to study. Um, and so, I went to the historical conference in April. It was a 4-day conference in October 2024. Uh, I attended panel discussions. I did two side trips, side quests or trips. Number one, I went to the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum, which was an incredibly great experience. I'm a massive baseball fan. I grew up a Yankees and Astros fan. I lived in Houston for 8 years, 1997 to 2005, and so you know, kind so I'm more of an Astros fan now than anything else. Um, Apparently, the Athletics or A's think I should become a fan of theirs in a couple of years. We'll see. I do attend Aviators baseball games, so I enjoy that. So I'm a massive fan of baseball. I do all kinds of sports metaphors in class from baseball, and so I really enjoy it. So going to the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum was extremely interesting, great experience for me, and I have some pictures in this section. The Negro Leagues is a unique example of that. When you study U.S. history, you have these pieces of Americana. This is definitely America. Right? Baseball is America's pastime. It's America's sport, America's pastime, and so it's this great American thing or activity. And then and then you study U.S. history, and you're like, well, there's the Negro Leagues, and so it's this piece of Americana, and we celebrate it. But then this is an example you study history, and it's like, oh, well, why did the Negro Leagues exist? And so it kind of dovetails between the patriotic, great American history, America as an idyllic nation of liberty and justice for all, and then America not living up to its ideals in such a way that black or African American baseball players had to have their own leagues for a while. And so it's an extremely interesting thing to study, activities or leagues to study, because it really hones in on this idea of America as a nation of ideals, a great nation, a wonderful nation, the American experiment, but a nation that doesn't always live up to its ideals. And so it's just a great place. It's just a great thing to study. A lot of great ball players. There's two parts to the museum. There's the baseball museum, and then they have a section. It's like the Negro Leagues Hall of Fame, and that's an interesting thing to walk and meditate and study and consider American history. Uh, and so that was really cool. And along the sidewalk from the Negro Leagues Museum to the hotel, they have like a jazz walk of fame. That area of Kansas City is a historic district, a lot of early jazz musicians, and so they have like a jazz musicians walk of fame, like the Hollywood Walk of Fame. So the first kind of really kind of side trip I did was the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum was really cool. My last day or after morning in Kansas City, I took an Uber out to Independence, Missouri, Jackson County, Independence, Missouri. For my religious faith, the city is extremely important. Um, 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 Latter day Saint or Mormon pioneers settled in that part of Missouri in the 1830s. Eventually driven out, persecuted and driven out, and that's when they went to Nauvoo, Illinois, and then eventually to Utah. But Independence, Missouri is an extremely important city or town or area for Latter day Saint history, theology, and so again, it was a great opportunity for me to go and again connect to the history of the region, the history of the area, and so I just thought it was a fantastic trip. I had those two experiences, which really connected me with with real history. These people really existed. There were Black American, African American baseball players, and they played in the Negro Leagues. Um, there were Mormon pioneers, and they lived in Independence, Missouri, and viewed that area as the center stake of Zion. And so, these people actually exist and actually live. And I have ancestors. I do have family history ancestors in that lived in Independence and Jackson County area as well. So it's family history too. And so it just really came alive for me. The Western Historical Association, back to the main reason I went, the historical conference. I went on some very interesting panel discussions. One really highlighted to me how when we study history, we focus on this narrative, and then people only show up for a period or a specific purpose to move the major narrative forward, and then we just kind of ditch them. And this historian did a paper on Tensikawa, the brother of Tecumseh, Tensikawa, a prophet who saw visions and who envisioned a pan Native American uprising to unite Native Americans and resist American expansion west. And so when you study the majority history or the common history, the popular history, or patriotic history, we talk about Tecumseh. Tensikawa gets brought up, and then once the Indians are defeated by General William Henry Harrison, we're done. We don't, and so Tensikawa, drops off the history, like no longer exists, and we just kind of don't know what happened to him. And so this one historian really talked a lot about this paper, focused on Tensikawa and the post highlight Tensikawa. Like, he may cease to exist for European American expansion west or patriotic history, but he continued to live. Tecumseh was killed, but he continued to live. He was a leader for Native Americans as they were removed further west. And I immediately I went back to class the next week and immediately had a discussion with students about it. And so that paper really, it was an example of I immediately was able to do some research and incorporate you know, because I'm guilty of that. I've been a teacher for 25 years, and I've been guilty of that. He comes up, and then, well, okay, oh, we're done with them. But that's the point. A broader study of American history. What happened to him? What was his voice? He was a voice of Native American unity, resistance to American expansion west, and so that was an excellent example of me going to a conference and immediately incorporating things, best practices and stuff. So that was one. Um, a second um, a second experience I had with the panel discussion was it was really interesting. An American Revolutionary War panel. They talked about the internationalization of the American Revolution, kind of American Revolution as a Western Hemisphere global phenomenon. And so one historian talked a lot about how in decades after when the Spanish American Empire fell apart, um, and the American Revolution played a role in that. Also, the game of empires, the French, the British, the Spanish, and how the American Revolution affected that. And again, American history, we kind of focus on just you know that American, which is fine. It's American history. It's kind of we're going to focus on that. Um, like with World War II, Russian historians, they focus on the Russian part of World War II. They pretty much ignore everything else. And that's fine to a point. It's your culture. You're going to focus on that. But it's also important to what's the broader sense of history. How does this specific episode affect a broader a broader past? The last event I want to talk about, or last panel I want to talk about, was really interesting. It was another lesson for me on, how we view the past and how sometimes we want the past to be a certain way and it's just not. It was a panel discussion on the Civil War, um, and specifically the Civil War kind of out west, which we don't think a lot about. Like, what do you mean Civil War out west? It's fine, like Virginia. And so the panel discussion was a really good discussion on the Civil War as understood in terms of other groups of people, specifically in an Indian war. Like one historian a while ago in a book said the Civil War was an Indian war, and so that was an interesting point of view. But one of the panelists was extremely interesting. She was a lady from Oklahoma. She was a historian, doctor from Oklahoma. She was a Native American um, from Oklahoma, and her work, she studied not just her family history, but Native Americans in Oklahoma. A good number of them sided with the Confederacy during the Civil War, and so it's a complex history. In our modern day framing, the Confederates are the bad guys and Native Americans are the good guys. And so, from kind of a modern day presentist point of view, it's shocking. It's like, well, the Confederates are the bad guys, Mr. Bills. But then you learn that history's not so neat. It's messy. Well, you have Native American tribes, the good guys. Some of them sided with the Confederacy and fought against the U.S. government, and they had their reasons for it, right? From the Native American point of view, the U.S. government had wronged them, was unjust, and had wronged them. Well, guess what? The Confederate states, they argued the same thing. The U.S. government has wronged us. The U.S. government has been tyrannical and wronged us, and so from that point of view, these two groups kind of dovetail in some ways. We feel wronged by the U.S. government, and so it was an example to me of, we can't, history isn't always this nice, neat little package. where the good guys are always the good guys, and the people we label as the good guys are always the good guys, and people we label as the bad guys are always the bad guys. It's like, you know, in that context, what is it? And so that was a really interesting panel discussion. The scholar, the American scholar, she talked about the complexity of that. Because again, in this day and age, in this current historical era, this current generation, the Confederates are the bad guys. So, you know, so you shouldn't side with them, and where you have this. And so it's just really a big lesson to me in this example of you can't be so inflexible in your historical interpretation that you can't deal with the messiness of history. History's messy because human beings are messy. Human beings don't fit into these nice little boxes of these are the good guys, these are the bad guys, right? Another example is World War II, right? We were the good guys. We were the good guys, Mr. Bills, right? Then you study Japanese American internment. That's not what the good guys do, Mr. Bills. The bad guys do that. And so again, you can't, as a historian or a student of history, you can't be so inflexible with your scheme of these are the good guys and these are the bad guys. You'll get disappointed. You'll get disappointed when you study history and you're like, oh, right, the past doesn't fit my presentist, current day presentist, scheme of who the good guys and the bad guys were, because human beings don't act like that. It's not what human beings do. Human beings subvert our expectations. So anyway, the Western Historical Conference, amazing conference, had a lot of great panels, and then I took a couple of side trips, and so it was a great experience as a historian. I feel like I grew as a historian, and thank you so much.